everyone, I'm Lien and I'm so happy to be sharing this colorful card on the Crafty Meraki YouTube channel today. Let's get right into it. I am stamping a bunch of images from the My Favorite Things Birthday Chicks stamp set onto watercolor cardstock. This is Canson Mauval 200 GSM watercolor cardstock, and I'm stamping the images in Versafine Onyx Black ink, and I'll be embossing them as well. I'm embossing them with Wow Clear Gloss Superfine Embossing Powder, and this just gives a nice shine to the line art. And embossed images are really easy to color because it's harder to go outside of the lines. I'm using a cloth to wipe over my MISTI because it's just smoother that way to stamp down, but you absolutely don't need to do that. Now once they're all embossed and stamped, I can color them in with my Karin Brushmarkers. I love coloring with these, and they are available at the Crafty Meraki store. And this yellow happens to be one of my favorites, which is great because I'll be coloring almost all of the chicks in that yellow. Only the small one I'm coloring in a lighter shade. Now when I'm coloring, especially when I'm watercoloring, I like to work in layers. This is just the first layer I'm putting down, and I will add a second layer later, and that will smooth out the blending and deepen up the shading. Now I'll paint all the images one time first, and that will allow the first image to dry completely before I go in with my second layer. Wet on wet is a great technique, but it's not what I'm going for here, so if you're not going for that, you probably don't want to add your paint onto a wet surface. The way I use these markers is really simple. I just put some color down with the marker straight onto the paper on the areas that I want to be darkest, where I want my shading to be. And then I go in with a wet brush. I use a very fine paintbrush for this, because again, that's my preferred way of doing it. And I just blend it out with some clean water. And I prefer coloring it this way because I am so used to watercoloring. It's basically all I've been doing for the past 5 years. But these markers do come with blending markers, and I think those might be more easy to use if you're not used to watercoloring. If you buy the markers separately, the blending marker is also available separately, but if you buy them in a set, they usually come with at least one blending marker. I think my set came with 3, and I never used them. So hit me up if you need a blending marker, I guess. Now I'm basically using the entire rainbow on this card. I thought I was limiting my color palette, but I really wasn't. I am using, however, the exact same colors for the accessories here as I will for the background, as you'll see later. So that does bring some cohesion to the entire card. Now to make sure the accessories won't clash with the background, I did some rough planning beforehand, and I knew roughly what my background was going to look like and where each chick would sit on that background. Now about this background, I love how this turned out. I cut a couple of squares with the Trafalgar Square die by Crafty Meraki. It's one of my favorite dies, you can do a lot of things with it. And I die cut it once from just plain white cardstock. I'm using Clairefontaine DCP 250 GSM cardstock, and twice from a cardstock where I had stamped and heat embossed a pattern on. I will list the stamps I used in the description below, but I used a striped background and a dotted background, and this just gives a little bit of detail to some of the tiles on my background. Now before I started ink blending these, I'm using Pinkfresh Studio inks. Again, all the colors will be listed in the description below. I had laid out all these squares on my card the way I wanted them to be. So I had a tiled background and I knew where each square would go, and this again will help me know where each color will go. Off screen, I am keeping all the squares on that card panel in place. And I'm just taking away one square at a time and ink blending it. And the way I'm doing that is I put a double folded piece of purple tape on the back of it to temporarily adhere it to my blending surface. And this is just a a piece of paper that I laminated. So that's a great blending surface, but you can use one of those mats if you want. I think this is great for filming. That's why I made it, because I had the tonic glass media mat, and that's awesome, but my lights just reflect like mad on it, and it's impossible to watch. So anyway, that's a great blending surface to use. If you're looking for one, just laminate a sheet of white cardstock. And again, I am using a rainbow of inks to blend my tiles here. Off screen, I also stamped a sentiment strip using that same stamp set, and I am white embossing that onto black cardstock. And I'm layering a couple of pieces of black cardstock behind that to add dimension to the piece. It's one of those tricks I picked up from Jennifer Maguire, and I will never change it. I'm doing the same for all the tiles. I cut a couple of squares for each tile. I think I cut 3 squares to put behind it, also from thick white cardstock, and I will layer those together and put behind the tile. I just trimmed those out with my paper trimmer, and I cut them slightly smaller than the squares, and this just makes it easier to glue everything together, because if they're the exact same size, you also have to glue them exactly together, and this way you don't have to be that fussy with it. And I'm just putting them all back the way I had arranged them beforehand, and once I have them all in place the way I want them, I will glue them on one by one. Arranging everything beforehand, so you have the entire pattern laid out, makes it easy to glue one piece in place at the time. Because it's easier to line one thing up in a pattern than it is to line an entire pattern up one by one when you don't have anything to go off. I'm gluing everything in place with Barely Art Precision Craft glue, but any strong liquid adhesive would work for this. I do suggest you use liquid adhesive because it gives you a little bit of wiggle time. I can then let that completely dry, and that will adhere it firmly in place once it's dry, and then I can trim off all the excess that's hanging over the edges. And then I can adhere everything else on my card. I did put a couple of foam squares behind my sentiment strip where it's hanging off of the tile, so it sits nice and evenly, and then I can also adhere all my chicks and the balloon with some foam squares. The Trafalgar Square die by Crafty Meraki has always been one of my favorites. It's great for slimline cards as it's intended to be. It creates a nice frame, but also you can create windows with it. But I love making this tile background as well. It's such a fun way to stretch your supplies. And that basically finishes up the card. I will make a matching envelope as well, so stick around for that. But yeah, I'm not adding any embellishments to this one because I wanted the background to shine, and there's a lot of detail in the background anyway, so it doesn't really need any embellishments. For my matching envelope, I am using a patterned paper for this, and I am just following the instructions on my We Are Memory Keepers 123 punch board to create an A2 sized envelope. This obviously is a super easy way to make a matching envelope, but what I love about this particular envelope is that I'm making it with double-sided pattern paper. And I normally shy away from those to make my envelopes, but this one just fit perfectly. It has some happy birthday wishes and birthday candles on the inside of the envelope, and it's nice and colorful, just like my card on the outside. The colors don't match exactly, of course they don't, but I think it's a good enough match to make a nice package of Happy Mail. And again, that inside is just so fun. I love how this colorful card turned out, and I hope you do too. If you did, make sure to leave a like on this video and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Please subscribe to the Crafty Meraki YouTube channel. I will be back every Saturday with a new project, but I'm hardly the only designer posting here, so stay tuned for all of those inspirational projects. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.